Hello and welcome to Board Stupid, the podcast. I love talking tabletop board games, D&D, and other awesome stuff. I'm Wayne.
I'm Simon.
I'm Tom.
We're just the nerds talking about the things we love that are worth geeking out over. So Simon, are you ready?
Yep.
Tom, are you ready?
I am.
I'm ready to get breeding. And if you guys are ready, we'll dive in to this week's episode. No further context required. This week, we played The Fox Experiment. We played as a series where we talk about an epic board game that we played this week. And this week, it's the dice chucking, trait collecting, domestication study, The Fox Experiment. In this episode, we're going to dive into the things we like and break down all the elements that make it great. At the end of the day, we only play awesome games, and The Fox Experiment most definitely does not accurately emulate selective breeding programs in a way that the internet would get mad about. Right?
That would never happen.
That would never happen.
People
Surely.
would never be mad about a board game on the internet.
That sounds ridiculous. Why would that happen?
It's got to balance out when the actual game is played by people who have more than 2 brain cells. It's fine.
It's fine.
Let's tell them why it's awesome.
Let's do that. So, about the Fox Experiment. In this game, you're going to breed your own domesticated foxes. In each round, you're going to select a pair of fox parents who have certain fox traits. You'll gain those specific trait dice, roll them, and then try to move them around to make complete trait symbols, which you'll then mark off on a pup card. You'll then gain trait tokens, depending on how many you've managed to mark off, which you'll use to upgrade various tracks on your personal player board. And at the end of the round, the previous generation of foxes will go into the mincer, and then all of the new pups that have been bred...
This is not going to be a PC review, is it?
All of the new pups that have been bred will be moved into the kennels, thus becoming...
Comfortably retired.
Thus becoming candidates to be the new parents in the next generation of foxes. The Fox Experiment will play 1 to 4 players in the base game as you can buy it, although with room for expansions up to 6 players. Designed by Elizabeth Hargrave and Jeff Fraser. Art by Joe Shawcross and published by Big Panda Pandasaurus Games. Playtime says here about 60 minutes. Accurate?
I think we did it slightly faster this time. You can definitely do it in less than 60 minutes. The first time we played this at a show with a very efficient German was
about 40 minutes.
Was about 40 minutes.
Yeah, you definitely speed march through it. I think we hit just under an hour this time, and I played Monday, and that was definitely not more than an hour and 20. So, yeah, I think an hour to an hour and 10, hour and 20 should be all you need. And
very doable, especially if you're not teaching someone to play at the same time.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That being said, for me at least, I might be jumping the gun here. I would quite happily reset and start again and spend 2 hours playing this.
Yeah, it's a really good game. It's an absolutely fantastic game, which we'll get into why that is as we go. MSRP is actually $59.99, so £60. You can get it much cheaper on Tinterwebs. So
on Tinternet.
On Tinternet. Yeah, so $59.99 as the MSRP. But as stated, you'll probably be able to find that much cheaper. Let's break down the components and art design, and I'll throw that over to you, gentlemen. What do you think about the components and art design?
Let's start with the box. I think, for myself, it's a nice, pretty image. I think it might equally put a bunch of people off. It's kind of an oil painting of a wintry scene with a couple of cute foxes on the cover and some people working in the background. I think it's one you're either going to love or potentially... maybe not hate. I think hate's maybe a strong word.
Be ambivalent towards.
I think
it's got the same sort of curb appeal as something like Wingspan, where you go, "Oh, that's a board game about breeding foxes or watching birds." And like,
yeah, it's that kind of strong nature theme, as you'd imagine, which isn't going to speak to everyone. Personally, I like it.
I think
as a box.
Typically, they've done very well recently, like nature-based games. So I think
they have.
Very on trend.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very much on train. Like Cascadia being another huge hit in that respect.
And then diving into the box itself and getting out all the components, I think it looks great.
Yeah, wonderful stuff. A relatively small board compared to some of the stuff we played recently.
The board is almost a secondary consideration. It's more like a place where you hold stuff rather than that you're actively playing.
The board's just to lay out certain cards and tracks and score counters.
Could even be smaller, I'd rather.
Yeah, and you've got your own player board as well, which is equally basically just a snapshot of the main art.
Yeah, there's kind of a wintry town.
It's not quite exactly the same art, but it's
Yeah.
a snapshot of similar art style. It's a little sort of village research area that you've got.
Yeah, we'll assume that it's the Russian town where this
I think so,
study took place,
yeah.
right?
And it essentially just boils down to a set of tracks for you to keep your tokens on for the engine building element.
Yeah.
I think it's very pretty and it doesn't overcomplicate itself, which I think is key. A lot of these games can end up with so much going on and it gets lost in the background art. I think the iconography stands clear of the art background, which is very nice.
Yeah, it's worth pointing out that there's no text anywhere.
Yeah.
Unless you start looking at the cards.
Bar
There's
the
no text on
science
the board.
cards, yeah.
There's no text on the board. There's no text on any of the tokens or the tiles or the player boards. It's all just a few icons.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is great for the most part. But pretty language independent, like you say, apart from some of the key rules on the science cards, etc. Comes with some great help cards, which is wonderful. And I'm always a fan of a player aid in games. And this comes with a really, really good one that's quite small. It sort of lays out everything you need to do each round,
Yeah,
which is pretty nice.
It's a single card, double-sided card that gives you all of the turn overview. And
nice.
then it sort of also gives you an idea of how to interpret the symbols and rewards on the pups as well on the other side. Because, I mean, it's not a terribly complicated game, but that is probably one of the more complicated bits.
Yeah, I'd say so. You also get a ton of little fox meeples, a set in each player colour. And something you guys noticed, which I didn't notice at all, was that there's a few different sculpts of the
5
wooden
different
fox
sculpts,
meeples.
which is wildly unnecessary because they are essentially just place markers. You put it down to note that you did something. So the
Yeah.
fact that there's 5 different ones is really cool, I think.
It is really cool. But yeah, unnecessary is probably a word because I literally didn't notice.
No, and they're not used for a huge amount of stuff. They are just score placeholders, really. They're used to track who's won a given round, that sort of thing.
I really appreciate them though, as rather than being a cube or something like that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Playing a game with foxes and you got a bunch of foxes, I think that's cool.
much better than cubes, 100%. You get many custom dice.
Many dice.
All the dice.
Many custom dice.
I was rolling
Five colours of dice that represent the 4 main traits plus the generic friendliness,
wild
wild
Do
trait.
you remember the traits, Tom?
There's like
Ear floppiness,
Yep.
tail bushiness,
Yeah.
spottiness, I think,
spottiness,
Yeah, kind of. Yeah,
Yeah,
dappled
and
texture of the skin. Yeah.
woofs.
and woofs.
And woofs.
Yeah.
100%.
The legacy of Loud Boy lives on.
Yeah, it's very representative because the idea being obviously the domestication of foxes being the study. What the scientists noticed was during the whole process of domestication, they would only be picking based on friendliness. That was their only consideration and the only thing that they would pick the parents based on. However, there were physiological changes that were related to that. So what they noticed were the friendlier the pups were, the more they started to
Favoured those particular traits.
those
right?
physical traits. They'd bark more in the presence of humans because they'd get excited,
Yeah.
or their tails would get shorter and their ears would get floppier because I don't know why, and they'd get like spottier coats. Very interesting.
That
But
must
yeah.
be quite tough as a science experiment, stepping away from the game as a sec, to separate that in the mind of how do you, like,
How do you gauge friendliness?
gauge is the word I wanted.
Probably they'd engage humans more,
Days
right?
since
to be
last
nicer,
savaging.
But do you-
days since last savaging. 0 days since last savaging. Let's start again.
How do you manage to differentiate and separate your brain from? Am I inherently more inclined towards seeing friendliness in this one because it's got floppy ears?
Yeah, right.
At
That's
what point
a
do
good
you
question.
realise and recognise that?
Good
you're...
question.
It's probably deeper than the coloured dice go.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah,
That's-
I mean, we're already getting we're already deeper than the depth of this game is.
yes, because it's a very light wash.
I want to mention the color palettes in play here. So your player pieces, you've got a nice soft yellow, purple, kind of a minty green, I'd say, and
Nice colour, so it's a red.
a soft red. It's definitely not the hard red that you see in a lot of games.
They're very pastel colours.
Yeah,
right?
and then the
Same
dice
with the dice.
themselves, you got again a nice blush, soft pink, almost a grey brown. And then what I've called purple and green, but I think you guys were calling
Mauve.
blue.
Blue, but it's
something
kind of
like
a
that.
bluey green. They're lovely colours. I mean, the
I think it
Pansaurus do
looks
wonderful
fantastic.
work with the colour palette,
They're,
especially.
they're not quite as neon as some of the Pandasaurus games, but it's the same sort of colour
Pastel.
palette, just
Yeah.
pastelised.
Yeah.
I think it's a fabulous colour choice.
Handfuls of little round tokens matching those dice, which you'll collect based on the dice you rolled, essentially.
Absolutely.
The traits, yeah.
And then a couple of wild card bits. You got your fifth color dice, so four trait dice, and then your wild card dice, which I wish would glow in the dark because it's that kind of bright green, but I don't think they do.
Yeah.
You also get these sort of tarot-sized cards. You get a deck of generic male and female parent cards, and they all delineate what dice you might be throwing.
And they really only come into play sort of at the beginning of the game and to then space fill later on.
They'll get cycled out.
The later generations become dominated with pups that you've bred from earlier generations.
And that's one of the key interesting things about this game, because you also have, each player will have a deck of wipe clean
So it's got
tarot cards.
Roll and write.
Like roll and write style.
Yeah, literally rolling dice, collecting the traits, adding stuff up, marking off the tracks, giving them a name, and customizing your particular legacy of friendly foxes.
Yeah. It's really nice. And they work great. Not stained yet, and I think I've played this 4 or 5 times.
Not stained yet.
Yeah, not
I'd
stained
hope
yet.
not.
Yeah, should I not? But you never know.
No, well, they're these easy wipe clean pens that you now get in basically every roll and write game, right?
Yeah, you get a set of those as well.
Yeah, it's the railroad ink pen.
Railroad ink pen, exactly, yeah. You also get a bunch of cards that aren't the sort of large tarot size, they're sort of more normal cards. You've got a study cards, science cards, and patron cards, and you'll use those for various effects in the game. And they're all lovely as well. No issue with the card stock. Good quality stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
How would you rate the production then, gentlemen, of the Fox Experiment?
I think it's really good. We did note that within the different sort of player colours, you have different art for like the males and females, and there'll be a couple of different sort of art palettes for the males and females, but they do recycle. So they're not fully custom. There's not hundreds of different pictures of foxes, but there's a decent range.
I mean, who can tell one fox apart from another?
Well, I know one of them looks like he's seen some shit. There's like some scary looking foxes.
yes, there is one.
He's in the blue.
He's in the blue deck?
No,
he looks
no.
terrifying.
I think he's in the general male.
Yeah,
one of them
but
looks
I've got a family of foxes that live outside my flat. I couldn't tell you one from the other. So the fact that these aren't entirely unique across 50 different foxes is neither here nor there.
Salty?
Salty.
Yeah, that did
Look out
some
for
some
him.
stuff, mate.
But yeah, I really like the overall design. I like the overall production. I'd easily give this a 4, if not a 5.
Very good. Yeah, I think I'd rate this a 4 as well.
Gives a number, Tom.
Sorry, Tom, looking at the cards, Thomas.
I'm looking at the pieces.
It's so carried away.
No, I'd definitely give it a 4.
Very nice.
Yeah, really nice.
Really solid production.
Yeah, solid production. Absolutely. Let's dive into the core mechanics and the gameplay. So, Simon, you won this game. How did you win it? How did you win this Fox Experiment?
Do the best foxing.
Do the best. Do the maximum foxing you can.
Foxes.
Friendly fox.
Friendly foxes
Okay,
win.
so there's a few different bits that are going to win you points at the end of the game. The couple of main ones on that is the studies that you do throughout the game, and these are small little cards that are asking you to basically get certain preferences, certain requirements of traits in the foxes in each round, and thus moving up the score. So they start at 2 points, then 5 points, and 10 points, getting progressively harder throughout a study as you kind of narrow down this 1 or 2 specific traits as you go.
Yeah. So it's a bit of a point salad, right? You can get points from studies, which is targeting certain sets of colours or
Then
traits.
more general overall friendliness, which we mark on the
You can
main board.
get one pup from each generation will win the most friendliness and will secure points for that player at the end of the round. You get points from patrons,
And they want you to do specific types
want
of
you to do
studies or
specific-
other kind of research that says if you've
Favouring
looked into
certain
this
traits or-
kind of thing or you've done more in this area, you'll get
they're
more points.
the Seven Wonders guilds, right?
Yeah,
For
endgame
various
scoring
different
mostly.
end-game scoring. You
And
get
then-
points for
Your own little player board. You can
player board.
upgrade various things. So you start off with 1 fox and 1 study, 1 wild dice, and then you can unlock more foxes. So you can each round kind of roll the dice for each set of foxes. You can unlock more studies, and if you get far enough across your own little upgrade board, they also become worth some more points. So yeah, as Tom said, it's kind of a point salad on those. And if you manage to roll an absolute ton of dice and kind of fill out a fox trait on any given fox beyond 5 in that thing. So you've got a super fluffy tail.
Super loud boy.
You're just gaining yourself points right there on the fox as
Yeah,
well.
they overflow and become additional points. And there's the science cards that can be used as one-off abilities or saved as points at the end of the game.
Yeah, I think that's more of a kind of by the by. Rather, I don't think anyone's going to be aiming to store science cards because you don't gain that many.
I had 5 at the end of the game.
Well, colour me corrected. I don't know. What can I say? So yeah, you got numerous routes in
Numerous
there.
routes to
You
victory,
can
lots of
choose to
points.
focus or spread as you see fit, and you'll get a good result either way. I think we've
Excellent.
not had a massive split in our scores from top to bottom. I played on Monday, and it was 69 to 68 to 67. So you
Very,
couldn't have
very
got much
close.
closer. And we all went on kind of different tracks and routes to victory.
Yeah, I like. We've played a few times now, and it feels like you can sort of focus down different trees and different orders of unlocking your upgrades, and still compete and do reasonably well.
Yeah, I think, very much so. Yeah, definitely point salady, but it still feels pretty rewarding no matter what route you go down. Let's break down what a turn looks like. You start with a selection phase, and what that essentially means is you're doing an open draft of stuff. Right,
It's
you're
the
either going to draft
only
it.
part of the round that's turn-based. Everything else is simultaneous.
Yeah, which is quite nice. Yeah, it helps smooth things along and makes things pretty quick. So you'll select either a male parent, a female parent, or turn order for the next round, which will get you some sort
You
of bonus.
pick something from the supply track, which also sets turn order
Yeah, which is
for
really
the following round.
Yeah, really cool. And that's really interesting because obviously, if you go first in turn order, you get your pick of the best foxes.
Yeah, and they'll start, as we said at the beginning, you kind of get the generic stack.
I think they have at most 3 dice.
They do. So it could be 1 dice, 2 dice, or up to 3 dice. They might all be the same or a combination of 1, 2, or 3 different. You might want to look at your study. So you've been asked, the one I've got in front of me asked me to invest more in green and pink dice. So I might be looking to start with for foxes that are going to offer me to pick up a green and or a pink dice.
Absolutely. Because at the start of the game, you're going to get studies, and they will focus you towards the type of foxes that you want to be breeding.
Yeah.
So once you've all made your selections, and you'll do that until you've got both a male and a female parent, and you've picked turn order, you're then going to move onto the breeding phase, which is essentially collecting all of the dice that the foxes give you and chucking them. Great.
It's the best bit,
Which
really, isn't
which
it?
starts off at like what 4 or 5 dice,
4 or 5 dice.
and gets really unmanageable. Later
It's up to like
on, and
16,
I had
17.
18 dice on my
fish
last
with
roll.
18
It was
dice.
great.
Yeah, it becomes two hands.
Oh, for
tremendously
Which is
satisfying.
So satisfying.
Yeah, tremendously satisfying. Just rolling buckets and buckets of dice. And that's fantastic. And what those dice do is give you the traits. They'll tell you how friendly or how bushy your fox's tails are, or how woofy they're going to be. And
They
they're
range,
interesting.
right? So they range from a half of a trait
Yep.
through to 1.5 in different combinations, and then you have to try and piece together the traits as complete symbols.
Yeah, I've not seen, although there might be some that I just simply haven't seen in the stack. There's not really any fiddling with the dice once they're rolled. So change this to another face kind of thing. It's not.
There are.
Are
Yeah,
there?
there definitely are. You can
Okay.
change them after you've rolled them. You can add extra dice.
I've
you
seen
can
ones
add
where you can
symbols.
I've seen
as well.
one where I can add extra, but I've not seen one that says you
not
can change
many
this
of
to
them.
that.
Yeah, I had a science card that said after you've rolled the dice, change 1 dice to any face you want,
Oh, perfect.
which is really useful because if you roll a half, you can change it to a 1.5
It's
Yeah.
way better. Yeah.
on your green dice, the wild one, and then you've got 1.5 symbols to sort of divide up as you like.
So once you've rolled all your dice cards, you've rolled all your traits, you're going to try and add them up to make whole symbols using your extra friendly dice, your green dice, which are wild, to either finish off half a symbol or create whole symbols of their own. And if you've got friendly tokens, which you'll collect through other sort of various bonuses in the game, you can
They're
chuck
sort of-
those in as
They're
well.
handed out as sort of like consolation prizes. They're like a little catch-up mechanic, right?
Yes.
If you pick the later initiative order choice, or if you lose a round on the friendliness score, you get them as in reward, and they help. I think they really help even the scores.
It's a great
They do, they're
balance
super
there.
powerful
Yeah,
as
they're
well,
effectively a half of a dice
Yeah.
to add on to something else, and they will round out those half dice that you roll quite frequently. But
Absolutely. Yeah, really smart.
it is interesting though, because you can't not roll at least a half, so you can definitely build towards. Well, if I'm rolling 2 pink dice, I can't fail to get at least 1 whole point that I can put into pink next time. So you can kind of work out. So end of this game that we've just played, I was rolling something like 6 green dice, knowing that I couldn't fail to get at least 3 whole green and then fill in the rest with my 4 wild dice. I could guarantee I'd get at least 5 green, which is what I was looking for on my study. It's the hardest the studies get, is to 5 in a certain colour.
Yep.
Plus a combination of pink on top of that. So yeah, you can choose up to a point where you place your little checkoffs on the dice. So all of your blue dice, you fill in your blue row, plus any extra wild you want to add, or in your pink or green or brown rolls, which represent those different traits. You kind of want to get the most you can generally. So sometimes you're picking foxes purely for the volume of dice, regardless of colour. Other times you might want to angle in just for the colours, depending.
It's interesting. So the pups that you get basically give you 2 types of reward. The first and the third marker on each track for each trait is a dice, which gives you nothing when you're breeding that pup. But it means that you're then putting a pup into the pool for selection next round that gives more dice.
Yeah.
The other spots, so 2, 4, and 5, give you trait points that are the main mechanism for unlocking the engine of the game.
They're the little tokens that you can use immediately after the dice rolling phase to then unlock more things on your board. So more foxes, more studies, more dice, or potentially the benefit of a patron, which would be an ongoing and end game score.
Once everyone's rolled their dice and assigned the values and written on their pup cards, you're going to determine who's the friendliest pup. And that's
Most
simply,
importantly, giving them a name.
Yeah, give them a name, of course. A name of your choosing.
Or a code number as nicked.
Yes.
X1.
Yeah, exactly. And the friendliest pup is essentially the one that has collected the most traits. And that's as simple as that.
Just total.
Yeah, total number. Once that's done, you're going to score any studies. Each pup that you have bred will go towards one of your studies, which is great, and that will score you points at the end of the game.
Matching up the sets of colours to a certain study that you're trying to do.
If I've got a pup that has 3 woofiness or 3 blue and 2 spottiness or pink, and my study needs me to get 3 blue and 2 pink, then he will score me that study.
Hooray.
Yeah, hooray. Exactly that. And once that's done and you scored your studies, you're going to collect all of the tokens that you might have generated, unlock any upgrades, which we talked about. And those are great. They will do some wicked stuff that will really make you more powerful as you go through the game. Like you can breed more than one pup, for example.
It's one of those that feels like every single one is super powerful. And why would you ever choose anyone else? And then you choose.
Difficult
you see
to
the
know
next
which
one,
way
right?
to go. Yeah.
Like more dice in a dice checking game. Of course, I want all of the dice. Oh wait, I can do a second fox, so I've got 2 chances to do a study.
Roll everything twice.
Yeah, so I rolled 52 dice in the last round.
Oh yeah, it really scales exponentially.
Yeah, more studies, so more chances to score different things, which is great.
Yeah, if you're struggling to get those 5 green dice, then pick up another study or just
score a bunch
couple of blue and a couple of brown.
Score a bunch of first or second stage studies rather than focusing to a third stage.
Yeah, and again, one of the patrons that we had in the last game I played gave you bonus points for every study you had where you at least started it. So if you had 3 or 4 studies and you had at least part way along, that's another 6 or 8 points at the end.
Whereas I think this time we all unlocked the patron that gave you points
for variety on your player board.
For having a trait, for having an upgrade unlocked with one of each of the 4 different trait colours. So having a set of those 4 upgrades was points. So we were all desperately trying to fill in as many upgrades as possible, not necessarily to score points, but because it scored extra points with the patron.
Yeah.
That's what those trait tokens that you've collected are going to be spent for, just unlocking upgrades. And it's really, really smart. And the final one of those that you can get is getting a patron interested in your study. And that basically means you can pick something that will give you some endgame scoring.
It gives you a really, potentially very powerful one-time bonus as well when you put your fox down in that patron space. Yeah. So. Very tempting.
Typically getting science cards as pretty much for all of those, and those things are little one-time use effects that you can spend the cards to, as we said earlier, roll extra dice or get an extra little bonus. So really, really cool. Once that's done, you just do some administration, clear the old generation out, put the new pups out, score some, who's the most friendly, and then you start the whole thing again.
And that's kind of it, isn't it?
For 5 rounds, and then it's over.
It's actually
very
quite straightforward.
snappy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Particularly the first sort of 2 or 3 rounds before people have started unlocking extra pups and extra dice, and the dice pools are relatively short, and there's not a lot of things to sort of make decision points on. The first 3 rounds are over before you realise what's going on.
Yeah.
And there's
for
only
sure.
5. So
What I found one of the most interesting decisions points in this game is as you're filling in any given fox and you're choosing where to increase the scores on in any of those given traits and potentially unlock more dice. As Tom says, you don't make immediate benefit of unlocking those extra dice, but it will go back into the pool for selection next time.
And if you happen to have made your initiative selection so that your first next round, you then get the best choice
Yeah.
of everyone's
Yes.
potential future parents.
If that hasn't
But your
happened,
choice.
do you then go, oh, I don't know if I want to make a fox that's got 2 of every dice. I might purposely scupper this one a bit so Tom doesn't get another dice next turn because he's going first.
Also, this is the first game I've played where there is actually an incest rule.
Yes, there is an incest rule.
Yes, if you...
Sorry, I think we should probably clarify. I don't do incest rule.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, incest
Must-
is bad.
must not,
it is
rather.
discouraged.
Must not rule.
There you go.
It's bad, yeah, which is interesting.
Yeah, if you pick up the cards from your previous round that you bred, you can't pick up both your male and your female and breed them without a penalty, which absolutely makes sense.
Yeah, super interesting that they've thrown that in as an extra rule, and yeah, would recommend playing with it. Fascinating game. It has some, like you say, really interesting decision space that I quite like, and but it isn't too complicated. In fact, BGG calls it a 2.3 out of 5.
I was
where would you
going
put it?
to whack this in sort of the wingspan area, which is about the same.
Okay.
Actually, I think wingspan is probably slightly simpler.
I don't know, because I think the Wingspan engine towards the end game gets more complicated because
Lots of abilities.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah, I think there's a
lay,
lot
lay exaction
more.
does lay exaction does lay exaction.
There's a lot
on-
of cascades and triggers in Wingspan. There's not really any of that.
I don't think there's any here.
All the decision is in how you manipulate the dice.
it's choosing which, if you can, using your wild card dice, which ones you want to focus in on, and then which upgrades you want to go for first, or
to focus
at
towards
all.
certain studies and traits
Beyond,
so that you can unlock.
beyond that, I'd say it's less complicated than Wingspan. So 2 to 2.5.
Yeah, it
I
makes
think
sense.
it's really straightforward to explain.
Yeah, I do think this is more streamlined than something like Wingspan.
It's one
You
you'll
could- there's
learn when you
not
play.
many.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not many sort of like complicated little exceptions in the game.
Absolutely. Alrighty, let's talk about the theme and gameplay interaction. So we'll try and steer away from the politics, but what do you think of the theme and gameplay interaction? Does it work together with the theme? How all the mechanisms work?
Yeah, I think it does a good job of emulating how things like domestication projects work, right? You can see that you pick. I mean, obviously everything is simplified down to coloured
Abstracted,
dice. Everything is abstracted. You can see how certain physical traits are collected together and magnified over time. It is very abstracted in how that works. And obviously, your foxes don't become superpowered and have, 5 times as many traits as they do as their great grandparents in real life. But it does a good job of sort of emulating how that focus manifests.
Yeah, I'd say it's quite a simplification of it, but I think it does stick true to having that feel. I'm just thinking in comparison to something like Dinosaur Island, where you are collecting and combining DNA. Okay, it's not quite directly the same, but so many more levels of complication in Dinosaur Island.
Oh, many more,
Than this. This is much more direct. This blue and this pink, this male and female, will give you these dice which are combined for the next one.
Yeah.
That next card will have all of those dice you just combined, and then the next lot, and then it's a slow and steady build, and I think it plays out really well. I think it suits the theme really well.
I like that because the dice rolls vary from half a trait up to 1.5 a trait. You can end up with 2 parents that you breed together that end up with a lower score in a given trait than either of the parents.
Yep.
If you're unlucky.
Yeah.
Which can happen.
Genetic lottery.
Those traits could skip a generation or something,
Absolutely.
and then suddenly come back later on.
Yeah, I think they've clearly thought about it, and I think it has been well implemented. Yes, it's heavily abstracted, but I think the theme and mechanisms do work together quite well. Let's talk about the flow of the game. So turn length, I think, is pretty good, mostly because the only turn-by-turn phase of the game is the selection phase, which happens pretty quickly.
It does happen pretty quick. Yeah, as we said, later on in the game, you're going to have more cards with more dice picking options in them. What we have noticed, though, is once all but one of you have picked, say, the male, the person who hasn't can focus on something else because they know no one else will be picking from the last two.
If your third pick and the first two picks are the male players, the male foxes for the other two players in your 3-player game, you don't need to worry about picking your male fox. You can do something else instead. You could have first pick of the females, or you could have first pick of the supply rewards that set initiative.
Yeah.
Really good.
I don't know if that's a bug or a bit of feature.
I'd say it's a feature. I think
it's definitely strategic.
Not everyone will recognise it or notice it as a thing. They might always go for 2 foxes and then the initiative. That might be how your game group plays. But both the times I've played it, we've gone, oh, hang on, neither of you can pick the male fox that I'm wanting now because you've already picked it. So I'm going to give myself the bonus I want in the initiative, and then I'll come back because there's no penalty to that.
I suppose the question is then is it strategic when it will always be the best option? There's never a time when you wouldn't do that.
Yes, you just need to recognise it.
Yeah, I guess, but I don't think it's a strategic decision. That's the point I'm making.
Okay,
it's the decision you make. But no, it's
not tremendously deep strategy.
No. But and then the rest of it is simultaneous, which is awesome. It's super smooth. I think once you get really experienced at this, you can blast this out at 45 minutes because the game does. As soon as you get towards round 5, we all recognised it. Oh, wait, it's round 5. Damn, that's done.
It's suddenly over. Okay.
You'll spend a good few minutes potentially working out the best dice layout, depending on
round
the
4 and
the
round
studies
5.
You've got.
Yeah, certainly.
And if you've got one more fox than an opponent might, because they might not have upgraded to unlock the 3rd or 4th fox, you're going to be one set of dice rolls behind them. But it's not a massive delay in any substantial sense.
It's nice not to have to really wait on other players making decisions during the rest of the turn.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's not really a huge amount of player interaction, so you don't really need to pay attention to what other people are doing.
Quite right.
There's no gotchas on taking the patrons, for example, because they're all friendly.
Mm-hmm.
The only real if there is any sort of take that, the only really take that is in the selection phase.
The open draft, and that's
everything in the simultaneous resolution phases doesn't matter terribly.
Yeah, you might be ultra competitive about overall friendliness of a fox and somehow try and use all of your stored up science cards to wiggle your way to one more point than the opponent. But again, I think that could either be held off information until it gets to the point of it. It just so happened that we weren't treating it as particularly private information. So.
No, absolutely.
Right, let's move on to some final thoughts then. So, what do you like most about the Fox experiment? And is there anything you didn't like?
Fistfuls of dice.
Fistfuls of dice.
Yeah, it is fun.
I like, and this is really a slightly more complicated roll and write.
It is. I think that's giving it something of a disservice. It is more than a roll and write.
It is, but at its core, it is dice built. It's a bit of engine building, but it's dice-powered engine building.
The
roll and write is a big aspect of it,
and the roll and write element sort of carries through the whole game.
Yeah, it's a good factor of it. It's not the entirety of it. There's a lot more at work than just chucking the dice and seeing what you get.
No, but your engine, your player board, for example, could have also been a wipe clean board.
True.
Could have been. Or they could have made this smaller and been a proper full roll and write.
It could have done a more complex one.
I don't think I necessarily needed to. I really like where it sits.
I very much
like the integration.
Yeah, looking at the dozen or so trait tokens I've got set on my upgrade board, if I was having to track all of those on another wipe clean board and then rub them out as I spent them and note them down again as I break more foxes, I think I'd be a bit dizzy, and you'd probably suffer from the staining of the wipe clean boards more at that point. I like how it's set out.
It's a good balance. Yeah, I like that it has stuff around the roll and write dice building, the engine building dice chucking mechanisms.
Yeah. Simon, what did you like the most?
I mean,
That as well.
The dice is the thing. I like how, and it became more apparent to me on this one. I looked at the foxes that were available, worked out which were going to give me most of the dice I needed, and then could very quickly, it wasn't a painstaking thing, and very quickly math out whether I could ever achieve the full end of my study. Or if I couldn't, then I could just move on to another, pick a different fox for whatever, for a different reason.
Go broad instead, try and get a different trait colour, maybe unlock a new study. And look for something in a different colour.
I like that it always allows you to quickly pivot, and you don't. Well, in the playthroughs we've had so far, you're not punished for having tried something and it not worked out, so you're having to choose something else. You can catch up, as it were, very quickly, I think.
Yep, I think it's great. I very much enjoy the dice rolling, not really dice manipulation, but how you choose to allocate your friendly dice to get the most out of your traits dice is actually quite interesting. If there's anything I don't like, I do feel like it's something of a narrow decision space. And what I mean like that is like sometimes I feel like there is certainly an option that is better than the other options. So I feel like there's not two equal options to me.
Yeah.
Right. And if you pick a study card, guess what I'm doing? I'm picking that fox, I'm picking that fox, and I'm picking that reward because that's going to help me get these studies. Which that's fine.
I don't mind a bit more of distinct clarity sometimes.
That's
actually,
it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is certainly a narrower decision space.
I think the way that the upgrades resolve, right? You can do upgrades after you do your selection phase. So
before and after, actually.
Well, before. No, it's only
after. Before and after breeding.
It's not before the selective phase.
Before and after breeding. Sorry.
Yeah. So you do the selection phase.
Yeah.
You've picked your two foxes, and then at the end of the selection phase, before you start rolling dice, you can go, oh, well, I'm going to spend some traits, do an upgrade, get a new study. You're only going to pick the study that synergizes with the two foxes that you've just picked.
That's what I mean. Yeah. The situation is narrow.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think it's fabulous. I love the design of the game. It looks great on the table. It's fun to play. I love the integration of roll and write with sort of a wider board game. I think more games should do that. I think it's real fun. But who is this game for? And what I mean by that is, if you like game X, you would also like the Fox Experiment.
Oh, I always feel like I'm in a hard place to recommend necessarily. If you like X, then you'll like this.
Well, you might like that. I mean, I think
it's a very generous game, so I think it is open to quite a wide range of people in that sense. Unless the theme particularly turns you off for whatever reason. As we say, people who like a lot of roll and write type stuff, I think there's enough here in that catchment area. We've mentioned Wingspan already. It's got a degree of that. I mentioned Dinosaur Island. It's by no way... So maybe the Dinosaur Roll and Write, whatever it was called.
Roar and Write, yeah. Although there was more actual drawing involved.
There was, I'm trying. Yeah, can't circle back to me. I'll see if I can. I was
going to make a weird comparison that has nothing to do with foxes or nature, but Race for the Galaxy has some of the same DNA. Being that it's an engine builder that is very much dice powered for the resources.
Interesting. Yeah, I think if you're a fan of roll and writes, you should certainly try this. But like I said, I do want to stress that it is much more than that. I think there's definitely a board game in here. If you like engine building, if you like open drafting, it has those elements. Kind of a light brush of those elements. The open drafting isn't going to be super punishing. The engine building, you're not building a complex engine that's going to trigger off a bunch of things.
Yeah, it's less of a draft and less of an engine builder than, say, the Century series.
Correct.
You're not having to constantly work out, if I do this, then this, I'll get that at the end. It's just, these are the two fox in front of me, so this is what I'll get this time.
Yeah.
Depending on what dice I roll.
There's not much in the way of... I want to say hate drafting, right?
No.
Mean-spirited drafting.
It's very difficult to hate draft in this game, I think.
You could theoretically sort of try and work out what other people are going for.
If you took someone's parent that they need, you're probably going to do it at your own detriment too.
Yeah. So because the foxes generally improve across all traits over the course of the game, you can only get 2 dice in each trait from any given pup. At maximum, that's 8 dice. Most of the pups at the end of the game end up with maybe 6 or 7 of them anyway.
Yeah.
there's not really a huge amount of hate drafting possible.
Yeah, unless someone is actively choosing the lowest numbered dice foxes over and over again, by its very design, you're going to end up with a minimum number of dice to roll, which keeps you well within a bounded accuracy type feature here.
And
right?
if someone picks the particular fox that you wanted, there's probably another option. And Simon, you said it, it's relatively easy to pivot. Grab a study upgrade, take a new study, go to a different colour.
Go
Don't
something
worry
else.
about it.
So, what is your final word, and how would you finally rate the Fox experiment? Actually, I'm going to quickly cut that out. I want to do value quickly, if that's all right, based on MSRP, I guess. Before we move on to the final word and your final rating, how would you rate the value of the Fox experiment based on its MSRP of $59.99? Consider things like gameplay experience that it gives you, production, all of that together.
I've certainly paid similar for similar games.
Yeah. So within the ballpark.
I really wanted to get this game anyway. We played this a year ago.
Yes.
At Spiel. And I was really keen on it then, and I was really keen to pick up a copy. Pandasaurus were kind enough to gift us a copy. I probably would have bought this anyway. In fact, I instructed you guys to buy me a copy of this anyway.
Yes. They gave us one for review purposes.
They were very generous for
Yes.
it, so I appreciate that.
What about you, Simon? What do you think value of the game?
If you put this on the table and I saw everything on it and asked me to how much I'd pay you, I would think I'd quite happily say £50. Probably not 60.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. I think that's, I'd be in much the same place. Lots of cardboard and wood, which is great. I prefer that over lots of plastic. But likewise, I'd certainly expect, I think, $49.99, no, $59.99.
I mean, don't overlook the fact that there's 60 dice in this box.
Yeah, I was just trying to count quickly how many there might be.
Actually, tell a lie. There's a ton of dice in here. But yeah, you're going to get this for cheaper than the
more than
MSRP.
that,
Yeah, absolutely. Right, so let's move on to the conclusion, your final word and your final rating of the Fox experiment.
There's 80 dice.
There's 80 dice.
There you go.
Tom, should we start with you? What's your final thoughts and your final rating?
My final thoughts are that Loud Boy lives on.
Loud Boy lives on in our hearts forever.
Yeah, in our hearts and in our minds.
Yeah.
Don't worry,
And
listeners.
in my
I'm as
ears.
bemused as you are.
And in my ears.
No, I really, really like the dice building element. It's probably more random than I would go for with a lot of Euro games. I prefer a crunchier Euro game. This is on the lighter side, but I really like what this does, and I think it does it really well to emulate the material, the sort of the variation in traits with these sort of selective
you generally
breeding
like to be able
programs.
to determine what you're going to get because you know how much power and currency and everything else you've got.
I like a deterministic game. This is not that, but you have enough tools to manipulate the dice to make it work.
Yeah.
And you have easy ways of pivoting, so it doesn't feel bad when the dice go against you.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm a bit more on the lighter side, as we know, so I actually quite like that I don't have to sit and feel like I'm failing to work out the best order. I can roll the dice and see what I can do with it. And I'm not having to think too hard, and that might sound counterintuitive, but that's actually quite a nice relief at times. I think it's immediately accessible to a wide range of people. And I think it's generous and rewarding. We said it's 5 rounds, so it's less than an hour of play. It's not going, if you're not enjoying it, it's not going to like hang around for too long. I think just overall it's really, really fun.
I think it's such a well-constructed game, right? Everything has its place. There is no spare fat on it. So there's no like extraneous mechanisms that make things overcomplicated because they could have done more with it.
Yeah,
there's
there's not 2 or 3 other tracks of stuff to potentially move into. Go, oh, I didn't even look at that this game. You're kind of involved in a bit of everything, which I think is the kind of game I like.
It sort of obliges you to do everything, so which is really nice. I think it's a tremendously well-constructed game.
And we say it's only 5 rounds, sorry.
Yes.
But if you look at all of our upgrade boards, we all, well, Simon and I got, 80% of the upgrades unlocked in 5 rounds.
Yeah, I've got 11 out of 14.
Actually, I did badly in this game, listeners.
Yeah, Wayne being an exception.
You were otherwise focused, let's say.
Yeah, I was otherwise focused.
And you just can't roll dice.
I just can't roll dice. Yeah, I should try rolling them better, to be honest.
Have you tried being better at dice rolling?
Yeah, have you tried, Tom Tit? Yeah, I think it's, like I said, a well-constructed game. Not too much spare fat on it. Very accessible. I think the theme is great. Ignore the nonsense online. It's irrelevant.
We might already have made more of that than it is. But
it's, kind of
at the time when this game is just hitting retail, if indeed fulfillment on the Kickstarter, to have 15+1 ratings from people who legitimately couldn't have played the game yet is just nonsense.
Yeah, so there is that.
So we'll go in and give it a 10 just to counter that, maybe.
No, we won't do that. Right.
Because we score out of 5.
Yes.
I'm giving this a 4.
You're giving this a 4? I'm also giving this a 4.
I think it's a solid 4.
It's a solid 4 out of 5.
4 and a little bit.
We love it. So, thanks for listening to Board Stupid. Subscribe to us for updates and to get future episodes of the show delivered directly to your ear holes via your favourite podcast service. You can also find us on Facebook and especially at Instagram at Board Stupid UK, run by lovely Simon, and anywhere you can find your favourite podcast. But also, right now, you can see us putting a load of effort and emphasis on our YouTube channel, so please follow us on YouTube. You can see us, exactly. There's going to be a bunch more stuff as we go keep adding content to there. So, if you like the stuff, give us a 5-star review, give us a comment, interact with us. We love it. If you've got any feedback or questions, please do let us know. Have you played the Fox Experiment? What do you think of the dice chucking, trait collection, and engine building? Did you enjoy getting to name your dynasty like we did? Thanks for listening. We'll catch you again real soon.
Do you remember the Animals of Farthingwood? Can we have a board game of that? That'd be...
That's like Root before the war.